They say you only see them when you're half awake, frozen in bed, unable to move, watching as a silhouette stands at the edge of your vision. But I saw them when I was fully awake, and they saw me, too. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch until the end, because the last story will change the way you look at the dark forever. I never believed in the supernatural. I always thought shadow people were just sleep paralysis, hallucinations, or tricks of the light when your eyes adjust to darkness. That was until last year, when something or someone made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. It started when I moved into a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. I'd just gone through a rough breakup and needed a fresh start, so I didn't care that the building was old and creaked with every gust of wind. The rent was cheap, the neighbors quiet. It felt like the perfect place to start over, but something about the apartment felt off. The first night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, as if the room was watching me. I remember checking the corners again and again, convinced I'd seen something shift near the doorway, but every time I looked, there was nothing. Just the shadows. The second night, I woke up suddenly at 3:14 a.m. My room was completely dark, except for the faint orange glow of the streetlight outside, filtering through the blinds. That's when I saw a tall, thin silhouette, standing in the far corner, near my closet. I froze. My first thought was that someone had broken in. I could see the shape, broad shoulders, head slightly tilted, but there were no features. No eyes, no mouth, just pure blackness, darker than the darkness around it. "Hey," I croaked, my voice shaking. The figure didn't move. I fumbled for the lamp beside my bed, and as soon as I turned it on, the corner was empty. My closet door was slightly open, though I could have sworn it was shut when I went to bed. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Sleep deprivation. Stress. That's what I told myself. Over the next few nights, the sightings continued. Sometimes, I'd wake to see that same shadow standing by the door. Other times, I'd feel it near me, hovering by the bed, like it was leaning over to watch me breathe. The worst part, I could feel it. The air would drop several degrees, my skin breaking out in goosebumps. I even started leaving the lights on, but it didn't matter. I'd see it reflected in the TV screen, in the window, always standing perfectly still, watching. I told my friend Jake about it one night over drinks. He laughed, said I was just exhausted, that the brain does weird things in the dark. But then he offered to stay over one night to prove there was nothing there. I was relieved. Honestly, that night, we watched a movie, joked about my ghost roommate, and eventually crashed in the living room. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up needing water. As I passed the hallway, I froze. The door to my bedroom was slightly open, and something was standing just behind it. I couldn't see its face, there wasn't one, but I could feel it staring at me. My body locked up, every muscle tensed. Then, it moved. It stepped backward into the room and disappeared into the darkness. "Jake," I whispered harshly, shaking him awake. "It's here." He sat up, groggy, rubbing his eyes. "What are you?" Then he stopped. His face went pale. His eyes widened. He was staring past me. Slowly, I turned around. At the end of the hallway, near the kitchen, another figure stood taller than the first. It wasn't moving, just standing there, a void in human shape, darker than the shadows surrounding it. Jake whispered, "What the hell is that?" Before I could answer, it glided forward, not walked. Glided and vanished as it reached the edge of the dim light from the kitchen. We didn't sleep that night. We sat on the couch, with every light in the apartment on, clutching baseball bats like idiots. When the sun came up, Jake left without saying much. That was the last time he stayed over. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. The figures appeared more frequently, sometimes multiple at once. Once, I woke up to find one crouched at the end of my bed, its head tilted at an impossible angle. I screamed, and it melted into the floor like smoke dispersing. I tried everything: sage, salt, even calling a local priest. Nothing worked. The apartment felt alive with their presence. Then came the night that broke me. I had been awake for hours, too terrified to close my eyes. Around 4 a.m., the power went out. The hum of the fridge stopped. The heater clicked off. Silence. Then I heard footsteps slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway toward my room. Thud, thud. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I couldn't breathe. The handle began to turn silently, slowly, and the door creaked open just a crack. And through that thin gap, I saw a single black hand, long-fingered and unnaturally thin, wrap around the edge of the door. That's when I ran out of the apartment barefoot, not even grabbing my phone. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away, standing under a flickering streetlight, gasping for air. When I finally returned the next day, the landlord told me the power outage had affected the entire building. But when I mentioned the shadows, he went pale and said quietly, "You're not the first tenant to see them." That was the night I decided to move out for good. But it didn't end there, because even now, months later, in my new place, I still wake up at 3:14 a.m. And sometimes, I swear I can see them standing in the corners again. I worked night shifts for almost 10 years, and I used to joke that nothing scared me anymore. You get used to the dark. After a while, a hum of fluorescent lights, the way the empty hallways echo your footsteps. But what I saw inside St. Margaret's Hospital still keeps me awake every single night. The building had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. It used to be a psychiatric ward before it was shut down in the early 2000s. Due to structural instability, the company I worked for was hired to watch over the place while a developer decided whether to renovate or demolish it. That meant sitting alone for 12 hours straight in a crumbling hospital where the walls still smelled faintly of antiseptic and mold. I started my shift at 7 p.m. sharp, clocking in through the side door. The moment I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. My breath came out in short puffs, even though it was mid. I remember thinking the air just didn't feel right. Stale, almost electric. The first few nights were uneventful, just the occasional rat scurrying across the hall or the wind slamming a loose window. But on the 5th night, something changed. Around 2 a.m., I was making my usual rounds when I noticed something odd in the West Wing. Donte Hall, past the Narsa station, a single door was wide open. I was sure I'd closed it earlier. The flashlight in my hand trembled as I stepped closer. When my beam hit the inside of the room, I froze. There was someone standing in the far corner. Not someone, exactly a silhouette. It looked like a person, but darker than black, like it was carved out of the air itself. It wasn't moving, but I could feel its attention on me. "Hey," I barked, trying to sound firm. "This is private property." No response. Just that unbearable silence. I took a cautious step forward, and my radio suddenly crackled to life with static loud and distorted, like a scream buried under white noise. I jerked back in surprise, and when I looked up again, the corner was empty. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from my flashlight, maybe fatigue. But, deep down, I already knew it wasn't. I'd seen it too clearly. The next night, I brought a camera, just an old body cam I'd used in previous jobs. I figured if I caught something weird, at least I'd have proof. Around 3 a.m., while checking the old patient rooms, I noticed something move at the edge of the lens. When I turned to look, nothing. But when I played the footage back later, I saw it. A pitch-black figure darting across the hallway behind me, fast, like it was avoiding the light. That was the moment the fear turned real. Every sound became a threat: the creak of a floorboard, the faint buzz of the lights. I started hearing footsteps that weren't mine, echoing in the distance, stopping whenever I stopped. Then came the whispering. It started soft, like someone breathing just behind my ear. I spun around, shining the light, but the hole was empty. The whisper came again, only this time I heard words, faint, stretched, and overlapping. I couldn't make them out, but they weren't human. My body went cold. I backed down the corridor toward the main security desk, heart pounding in my throat. As I passed the nurse's station, something caught my eye, a reflection in the dark glass of a display case. There were 3 of them standing behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. I saw their shapes dull, motionless, with arms that seemed too long, and they were watching me. Then one of them moved, its head tilted slowly to the side, and the reflection bent unnaturally, like it was closer than it should have been. The lights flickered, the radio hissed, and I ran. When I finally made it outside, I called my supervisor, gasping for air, trying to explain what happened. He told me to calm down, that he'd seen guys crack under the pressure before. He didn't believe a word I said. The next evening, they reassigned me to the North Wing, thinking it might help me get my head straight. It didn't. At 1:47 a.m., the power went out again. Total blackness. I tried to radio in, but it was dead, just that same horrible static. And then, down the hall, I saw movement. Slow, deliberate movement. The outline of a figure stepped out from one of the patient rooms. My flashlight flickered, and I realized there wasn't just one. There were dozens. They lined the hallway, their forms rippling like heat waves. Every time the light flickered, they were closer. 10 feet. 6. 3. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, a soundless roar filling my head, like something was pushing me out of reality itself. I dropped the flashlight and bolted for the exit. The beam rolled across the floor, catching a glimpse of a figure lunging forward, arms stretching, shadows bending unnaturally toward me. I reached the door and threw my shoulder into it, bursting outside into the cold night air. I didn't look back. I quit the next morning. When I went to collect my things, the new guard who'd started after I left was waiting at the gate. His face was pale, eyes wide. "You worked here last week, right?" he asked. "Did you ever see something in the halls?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A week later, he went missing during his shift. They found his flashlight by the nurse's station. The footage from his body cam was corrupted completely black, except for one frame. It showed the same hallway where I'd seen the reflections. And in that frame, just before the camera cut out, there was a single silhouette standing in front of the lens, reaching forward, as if touching the camera itself. No one guards that building anymore. It's been sealed off. But sometimes, when I drive past it on the highway late at night, I swear, I can see figures standing in the windows. Watching. Always watching. They say children see things, adults can't, things that hide in the dark, just out of sight. I never believed that, until my 6-year-old son started talking to something that wasn't there. It began last winter, after we moved into a small house in Oregon. It was old, but charming in that rustic way, with creaky wooden floors, a tiny attic, and a forest stretching behind the backyard. My wife loved it. My son, Evan, not so much. From the very first night, he said his room felt too dark. I thought he just missed our old home, so I got him a nightlight. One of those small plug-ins that cast a soft blue glow. It seemed to help, at least for a while. Then, a few nights later, I woke up to whispering through the baby monitor. At first, I thought he was talking in his sleep, but when I listened closely, I realized he was having a conversation. He said, "No, I can't." Daddy said I shouldn't. Then a long pause, and then, "Okay," but only for a little while. I rushed into his room. He was sitting up in bed, looking at the far corner, the one where the nightlight didn't reach. "Buddy, who are you talking to?" I asked, gently. He blinked at me, confused. "My friend." "The tall one?" He said he lives in the dark parts. I tried to smile, brushing it off. Kids imagine things, right? But as I turned off the monitor and tucked him back in, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The corner I'd been staring at it wasn't completely dark. There was movement, like the shadows themselves were breathing. I stayed in his room that night, sitting in the chair by the door. Around 2:45 a.m. the air grew freezing cold. My breath turned white. I checked the window, it was shut tight. Then Evan started mumbling in his sleep. "He's here," he whispered. "Don't let him touch you." I looked toward the corner again. En primera sa, W italiano. A ship taller than any person slowly peeling away from the darkness. It didn't have eyes or a face, just this void, darker than anything I'd ever seen. It glided forward, smooth and silent, until it was standing right behind Evan's bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Every instinct in my body told me to run, but I couldn't leave my son. Then, as if sensing me, the figure turned its head. It didn't have features, but somehow I knew it was looking straight at me. I flicked on the bedside lamp, and instantly it was gone. Who's like that? The temperature returned to normal. Evan stayed asleep, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I told my wife what I saw. She said it must have been a trick of the light, stress, lack of sleep. I wanted to believe her, but then Evan came into the kitchen, still rubbing his eyes, and said quietly, "Daddy." The tall man said, "You made him mad." That was the first time I truly felt fear. Over the next week, things escalated fast. The nightlight started flickering uncontrollably around 3 a.m. Every night, Evan would wake up screaming, pointing at the ceiling, shouting, "He's crawling." When I rushed in, I'd see the shadows shifting unnaturally across the walls, stretching and twisting like liquid smoke. One night, my wife and I were jolted awake by a loud bang Ivan's door slamming shut on its own. We ran to his room, but the door wouldn't open. It felt like something was pushing from the other side. I threw my shoulder into it, and when it finally gave way, Evan was sitting on the bed, shaking violently. "He's mad," he said. "He said you don't believe." I was done pretending this was normal. I set up a camera in his room the next night, determined to catch whatever it was. The footage was normal for the first few hours. Evan tossing and turning, mumbling in his sleep. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., the camera glitched, the image warped. The sound cut to static. When it came back online 2 seconds later, Evan was sitting upright, staring directly into the lens. His eyes were open, but blank, unfocused. And behind him, in the far corner, was a figure. Tall, thin, pitch black. As the footage continued, the shadow moved. It reached one impossibly long arm toward him, and right before it touched his shoulder, the screen went black. That was the last night we spent in that house. We stayed at my parents' for a while, far away from the woods. Evan slept better, though he still woke up crying sometimes, saying the dark man was trying to find us. I took the camera to a tech friend to recover the corrupted footage. When he handed me the USB drive, his face was pale. "Man," he said quietly, "I think you need to see this." In the recovered clip right before the blackout, there was one clear frame the glitch hadn't erased. The shadow figure was gone, but something else had appeared. It was Evan. Only not Evan. A dark outline of him, standing in the opposite corner, facing the real Evan on the bed, like a mirror made of pure darkness. When the image cut to black, the timestamp froze at 3:14 a.m. That was 3 months ago. Evan's been fine lately, but sometimes, when he's half asleep, he mumbles things that chill me to my core, like last night. I was tucking him in when he opened his eyes suddenly and whispered, "Daddy?" He says, "Thank you." I asked, "For what, buddy?" He smiled faintly. "For letting him stay." I turned off the light and walked out of the room, but as I reached the hallway, I felt it again, the cold rush of air, the static hum in my ears. And when I glanced back, for just a split second, I saw it standing there behind him, the tall shadow, unmoving, watching. If you ever see something in the corner of your room that doesn't move when everything else does, don't. And if you've ever had a similar encounter, share it in the comments below. Subscribe for more true horror stories, and remember, sometimes the shadows aren't empty. Sometimes they're looking back.